Hey there, I'm Nick Bolton. I'm the founder of ICCS, and today we're going to be taking a look at probably the most fundamental question in coaching supervision, which is, what is coaching supervision? Like any of these professions, supervision, counseling, coaching, the name often doesn't describe the activity very well. I had a very experienced coach talk to me recently and said he was challenged by something in his practice, and I said, "Have you sought supervision?" And he said to me, I've never wanted to have my coaching overseen by an authority like that. And I was like, wow, that's not supervision. And it really brought home to me. It really made me realize the way people don't yet understand, or at least a lot of people don't yet understand what coaching supervision is. And so this first video in this series of explorations will address this basic question. What is supervision? What is coaching supervision? And quite frankly, and quite simply, we could put it like this. It's a conversation between equals that explores the professional practice of one of those equals. That's essentially it. Now, of course, we're looking at the context called coaching. If you look at supervision in certain areas, like managerial supervision, is a very different thing. But if you look at supervision in the coaching realm, it's a conversation between equals. Now, the supervisor brings a certain amount of experience. You can't just be a supervisor from day one of being a coach. You have to build up a lot of experience before you can consider being a supervisor. But that's less about knowledge and more about in the trenches experience that enables you to A, hold a space that's appropriate for a coach that you're working with, and B, offer ideas and experiences that you've lived through yourself, as opposed to simply theory that you read in a book. And that's really the whole point of a supervisor being an experienced coach as opposed to a brand new coach, because in a sense, you could say that the foundational skill of supervision is essentially the same as coaching. It's holding a space of curiosity and genuine care for the person in front of you. However, and so that's the foundational skill. However, it begins to be nuanced when you look at, well, okay, but for what purpose? So when we look at coaching, we think of coaching as being about what we might call a dyad, two people. It's a relationship between two people, which is focused on the well-being or outcomes or progress or success or whatever words you want to use of the client. Now, in coaching supervision, it's somewhat more diffuse than that. Coaching supervisors don't only look at the person in front of them, which in their case would be a coach or what we might term a supervisee. Part of the responsibility of a supervisor is to actually hold in their mind's eye the whole system that coach works within. So, for instance, whilst a coach working with a client might only need to think about what the client is thinking about, the supervisor needs to say, well, hold on a sec. What is the end user of this coaching experiencing? How are they benefiting? How are you as a coach serving them or not serving them? And even beyond that end user called the client, what is the system in which all of this is taking place? Need from you, the supervisor, need from you, the coach. And how does that coaching client relationship that you're exploring within supervision fit within a system? In other words, it's very possible that a coach and a client could be in a collusive relationship against the very system that's paying for that coaching. And it's part of the responsibility and let's say the aims of a coaching supervisor to notice how is the coaching fitting within the wider system in which that coaching is taking place. What is happening for the client? What is happening for the coach? And so this is why when we think about coaching supervision, we think of it as a systemic practice. We're always looking at how are the moving parts influencing each other? How am I, as a supervisor, being influenced and influencing this person called a coach? And how are they, in turn, being influenced and influencing this person called a client? And how are they being influenced and influencing the thing they call a system? And we can start to look at each of those dimensions. Now, in a later video, I'll be talking about this seven-eyed model, which is a particular approach created by Peter Hawkins and Robin Shoet many years ago, which let's say proceduralizes the ability to look at all these different aspects and moving parts, because it can be quite easy to be lost in a forest of ideas if we don't have some sort of structure. But nonetheless, the point here is that as a coaching supervisor, you're responsible not only for the person in front of you, but for the whole system of things that you're beginning to work with. So that's the essence of coaching supervision. First of all, it's focused on the practice, the work of the person in front of you. If it begins to edge away from the work and doesn't bring itself back to the work, then you're, in a sense, no longer supervising, you're doing something else. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it needs to be at least named that, hey, have we moved from supervision to something else? So supervision fundamentally is focused on the practice, the professional practice of the person in front of you, the supervisee. Now, within that, we could say there are three ways of looking at the supervisee, the coach, which is the person as a coach. In other words, how are they performing as a coach? How are they operating as a coach? How effective are they as a coach? Where's their growing edge as a coach? And then you could think of the coach as a professional, by which I mean, as a supervisor, you're looking at how is that coach representing and embodying the profession they claim to be part of. If they could say, well, I'm coaching, but it's like, well, we could say, well, it doesn't look like any kind of coaching we as a profession recognize. So how are they being in terms of their ethical behavior, in terms of the norms of the profession and so on? And the third thing, which is often overlooked, is how is the coach, the professional person called the coach, as a person? In other words, what is the impact of the coaching on that human being called the coach? So we can look at these three things: person as a coach as a professional, and coach as a person. And each of those gives us a new lens to look through. So not only do we have this 7 eyes that looks at the whole system, but we now have these 3 lenses which are enabling us to look at the person in front of us through 3 particular ways of thinking about it: as a person, as a professional, and in terms of the coach. And we can think of that in terms of what's often called the functions of supervision, which is the formative function, formative being how are you growing your skill? How are you performing as a coach? You can think of it as the normative function. How are you operating with the norms of the profession? And the restorative function. How is this work impacting you? And how can I, as a supervisor, support you in bringing yourself back to yourself? So I'm hoping at this point you've got a better sense of what coaching supervision is. The thing it isn't is top-down hierarchical management and authority. That's really, really clear. And that's where my friend was so off with his understanding of what it was that he'd resisted it for years. It's simply a space for the coach to explore their work in order for them to become a better coach, a coach with better well-being, and a more professional, ethical coach. And it's a place for that coach and you as a supervisor to explore the impact on the whole system that coaching is taking place within. So I hope that was a succinct and useful introduction to what coaching supervision is, but in later videos I'll go into each part in more detail. Thanks very much. I'll see you on the next video.